One benefit of me being a committed MMA hobbyist and wanting to pursue mixed martial arts through content creation and not pursuing it as a professional fighter is that I can be an advocate and speak on certain topics that unfortunately some MMA fighters aren't in the position to talk about and probably wouldn't talk about in fear of jeopardizing their career, which is completely understandable. I mean, if you worked and grind to finally climb all the way to the top, to make it into a big name like the UFC, you're most likely going to want to stay there and reap the benefits. I have so much respect for these fighters and honestly believe that they should be paid more and they should be paid well. So should UFC fighters unionize?
The fighters need a union. They need a union, just like MLB and NFL, NBA has. That's the only way they're ever going to make a change. Yep. This just makes things the exact same. Now, the argument to that is, okay, so if the UFC, whatever, paid how you think, and I don't know their books, their financials. Mm-hmm. So if you think the UFC should pay fighters this much, I don't know if they can run a business I don't know. I don't know the books. So I speak on it, but I know certain guys like Tyson Pedro, who, has an 8, 9, 10-year career, whatever it was, is dead broke. That doesn't sit right with me. But again, if you go to Dana and goes, well, he should have won more fights. It's like, that's how, like, he should have won more fights. But then, because in the NFL, NBA, score more points, you get more money. Win more fights, you get more money. But they're compensated when they retire. That's the difference. Like, once you're done, you're done.
The NFL started in 1920. UFC 1 started in 1993. Now, I know comparing to other sports, the UFC is pretty new. But yes, I think it's a valid argument here that although football players are putting their bodies and health on the line for our entertainment, they are definitely being compensated well, and they are for sure being taken care of during their retirement ages. Now, that definitely cannot be said about the same with most MMA fighters or most UFC fighters. And the famous ones that you see on TV, the prize fighters, the top 1%ers, of course, they're probably going to be taken care of after retirement, right? But that is still just a very small percentage of fighters that is actually on the whole UFC roster. I mean, I think about how some of these boxers just get paid out millions, while basically some of these UFC fighters, MMA fighters, are fighting for peanuts.
In order to make any change, whatever that, I don't know what change they want. I don't know what they're asking for. I don't know any of that information. You would have to unionize. You have to. Yeah. You have to get Conor McGregor on board. Izzy, Strickland, the Sugar Shay, all the guys making all the money that can make a difference would all have to be in on this, and they're not because the UFC is smart.
What he says here, I believe, is definitely true. You wouldn't really be able to pull off anything with just the low-tier fighters coming together. In my opinion, you would need to have the well-known big superstars in the league to all join together and try to speak for these other fighters. But of course, with most fighters, they're most likely looking out for themselves. And I mean, after all, why wouldn't you? When the first rule of fighting or self-defense is rule number 1, protect yourself at all times.
What you want, the guys that make the most money really don't fight each other because they're fat and happy. Canelo just asked for $200 million to fight Benavidez. So it's like, do you want to create these monsters? Or if you're Dana and you're running basically a human cockfighting tournament, do you want to leave them hungry so they're fighting, giving you their best performances?
In recent times, the UFC is bigger than it has ever been. In a 2023 financial report by TKO, the promotion increased its revenue by 13% from the previous year, totaling $1.3 billion. Despite the company generating billions of dollars, the promotion's athlete, especially the entry-level fighters, are compensated poorly. As sentiment reiterated time and time again from athletes, commentators, and journalists alike, when compared to other major league sports, UFC fighters make less than other athletes. The UFC pay is based on a tier system according to Dario AS. I don't know if I said that right, but The lowest tier fighters are typically paid $10,000 to $30,000 per fight, and the highest tier fighters earn approximately $500,000 to $3 million per fight. This is without factoring in any performance bonuses. But when compared to other athletes from different sports, UFC fighters' salaries pales in comparison. For example, in the NBA, the average salary is $8.32 million for the 2020 to 2020 season, according to Kron. It would take 30% of UFC fighters forming a union for fighter pay to go up. Why should the fans care about something fighters are too selfish to do? Employers will always pay you as little as they possibly can. That's not new. Fighters should band together and stop only looking out for themselves. Legally speaking, the athletes who do fight under the UFC cannot form a union due to them being classified as independent contractors and must instead be categorized as employees according to the National Labor Relations Act.
If you're playing for an additional football league outside of the NFL,
It's frowned upon.
it's just like I've said this before on the podcast, and some fighters got mad at me.
What?
Listen, I understand if you go to Bellator if they pay you more money, and I support you doing that. What I'm saying is if you want to be the best in the world, you want to be the most famous motherfucker, the king of the king, at 155 pounds, 170 pounds, 185, 205, you have to fight in the UFC. You can make it if you're a prize fighter, but if you're a fighter and maybe you're one of those guys that fought in the UFC and then you go over to PFL and you make $1 million for the tournament, awesome. Plaintiffs in the case allege the UFC suppressed fighter pay through anti-competitive tactics such as shutting out competition and controlling the market for top-level fighters.
Say what you will about Dana White, but him and his team definitely marketed and brought up the UFC the way it is today, and it is truly amazing that they have made themselves such a household name to the point where I've had people ask me, like, hey, do you train UFC? Like, dudes that have never had any sort of training before. It's like, no, you don't train UFC. You train mixed martial arts. But anyways, man, again, it just shows you how solidified they've really made themselves. So even if a fighter could go to another promotion and get paid more, the UFC is really where they could get the biggest chance of notoriety and publicity. And of course, that would be amazing for a fighter's career. So maybe that's why some of these fighters will accept the pay that they do. I could be wrong, but again, that's just a thought.
Did like some tactics?
Well, they bought out the competition, which is definitely true, right? They bought Affliction, they bought Strikeforce.
Is that illegal?
No. They do it in everything.
Oh, yeah.
But in some businesses, there's they will like break you up if you have a monopoly.
So they're subcontracted. So the UFC is saying you can't have any other sponsors. We control that. But
Right,
then they go,
during the
"You're
Reebok
subcontracted."
days. Right.
And then there's no benefits as well.
Well, the Reebok thing, that there's a real argument there, right? It's like you all of a sudden take away the fighter's ability to have ads. And that was one of the things that
But
I
no
knew from
sport-
you, that you had more money in sponsors for your shorts or for the fight week than you did from your purse.
Correct.
The fact that you can be a fighter and not accept certain sponsors because of the contract you signed with the UFC would probably make some feel like as if they're an employee while still having to withhold the responsibilities of a freelance, self-employed athlete. Taking fighters' abilities to have ads would absolutely put a dent in their potential overall earnings throughout the years.
UFC is like the Vaseline of petrol jet. Don't say, hey, I watch mixed martial art. They say, I watch UFC.
Right.
They don't promote the fighter. They promote mostly the brand. And it's very smart. They're a business because they're there to make money, right? It's a smart move. But for the fighters, I mean, if you're on the winning hand, it's a good thing to be promoted. But if you're in the losing hand, get another job, you know?
Even though there are plenty of other fight organizations, they all seem to be like feeder leagues that try to eventually bring the fighters into the UFC anyways. I mean, even the major leagues like the PFL and all of them seem to be feeder leagues of the UFC. The UFC is not a monopoly, technically speaking, but the fact that everything leads back to Big Brother Dana, well, I mean, I guess I'll leave that up to you to think about. Anyways, Do you guys believe that UFC fighters should unionize? Let's have a discussion down below. I really want to know your thoughts on this subject. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And if you out there, keep training.